Now let's get a big picture overview of the conflict between the U.S. and Iran and learn about some potential outcomes from Michael Pregent, a Middle East expert and former intelligence officer. Michael, it's good to have you here. Can the attack on Iran knocking out the regime's leadership lead to democracy and freedom in Iran?
Well, as a former military guy, I can't do hope, right? I can't hope that that's the outcome. We have to look at indicators on the ground. What we do know is that the regime its leadership has been degraded. So they will find ways to replace people, but as they're replaced, they are attacked by Israeli airstrikes with a combination of U.S. and Israeli intelligence. What we need to do is keep the regime from being able to take back control of the cities and allow the people in Iran the time and space to change their government. This needs to have an Iranian face, but they have been asking us to provide air cover and to target the regime, and that's what the United States and Israel is doing.
Yes, and Michael, 49, that's how many Iranian leaders have been taken out just in the first round. There may have been other rounds subsequently thereafter. So what would that look like? President Trump is saying they might not even know anyone who's at the end of that list when that time comes.
Right, so it's key that those targets were taken out in the daytime, right? On day one of the operation. They were in a relaxed mode. They thought because the sun rose, that meant there would not be a strike window from the U.S. or Israel. So they kind of relaxed their security posture. In that, intel assets on the ground were able to confirm that meetings were taking place, and there were 3 simultaneous strikes that took out top leadership across the board, from the supreme leader to his councils and to the IRGC leadership. What's happened since then is the replacements have been targeted. There are intel assets on the ground that are able to identify moving target indicators and targets of opportunity, and that's what we're seeing now. As this continues to go, it's going to be harder and harder to target these individuals because they will take their uniforms off. They will go to civilian clothes. They will go to try to blend into the population. Their cells will start using mosques and schools to operate from. And we're starting to see a video and photos of that actually taking place, where IRGC members are holding key meetings in schools or mosques. And that is always an issue, because if the U.S. hits it or Israel hits it, then it becomes this media campaign against the Operation Epic Fury.
Thank you for dissecting that. And everyone's hoping for the best. You mentioned hope. Now, there have even been what have been described as potential sleeper cell terrorist attacks in Austin, for example. Is there a realistic risk of future terrorist attacks being provoked against the U.S. as a result of the Iran conflict, and how can that be mitigated?
Okay, so you have to look at what happened over the last 2 years in this country, or actually the last 3 or 4 years in the United States. We've allowed a lot of people in, and as a former counterinsurgency intel officer, all I need to do is find 10 people that are willing to conduct attacks. So if I was a terrorist leader, I would basically find a 10-man cell somewhere to be able to conduct a October 7th style attack on people just going about their day. We also have the lone wolf, right? This guy in Austin is a lone wolf. He's not tied to Tehran. They didn't reach out to him and say, go kill people, but he decided to embrace it as champion this cause to get revenge for the Supreme Leader's death. That is likely to continue. But I'm very worried about these 10-man cells all across the country, and they don't have to be tied directly to Iran. They just need to see a window of opportunity. And these would be Sunni cells. These could be cells tied to Lebanese Hezbollah, to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS. So that is a real threat. And so local law enforcement and our intelligence community need to be talking to each other. The FBI needs to be working with local law enforcement and the IC, but we know we don't have the people to be able to do all of this. So even the private sector could help identifying some of these cells, but law enforcement has to actually go after them. But I'm very concerned about that.
Very interesting, Michael. Yes, keep a close eye. Now, President Trump says that he will still visit China soon. Now, China, authoritarian regimes stick together like birds of a feather. They're backing Iran and supporting it in all this and verbalizing that. Now, how could U.S. strikes on Iran affect this potential meeting between President Trump and Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping?
I think there are several elements, right? We've seen Chinese air defense assets fail against the United States and fail against Israel. So China knows that their equipment isn't up to par in actually dealing with a U.S. airstrike or an Israeli airstrike. China exports these military systems, and most countries buy 3 of them to make sure one of them works. They cannibalize the other 2 to make one work. We also know that this is having a huge economic strain on China, with the Strait of Hormuz being clogged up right now as these oil companies try to get the insurance, the war risk insurance, to make sure they can continue to navigate. But we see China not really helping Iran militarily. Iran's turning out to be a bad return on investment. China has not been able to sustain this $480 billion economy with the amount of money that they poured in since the JCPOA, the Iran deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was put in place. So there are a lot of things. Trump will go with the upper hand when he goes to visit China. You know, the United States is demonstrating, sending a message to Russia and China that this is what our military can do. Supply chains, everybody talks about that. You know, the capitalist society find a way. If there's a need, there'll be a supply. And I'm not worried about munitions running out because defense contractors are already ready to backfill in any shortages anywhere.
Makes perfect sense. Deterrence, deterrence, deterrence. Peace through strength. We've heard that many times from the White House. Now, what needs to happen to ensure that this assault on Iran will lead to a safer Middle East and a safer world? If I'm not mistaken, in Iraq, you had a vacuum, you had millions of people, 1 million people die. The advent of ISIS, how do we prevent all that and move forward in a constructive manner?
Well, the goal needs to be that Tehran or the regime cannot fund terrorism, cannot continue to build its missile program, cannot continue to seek a nuclear weapon. We have to remember that the 20-year war in Iraq, the enemy of the United States, Al-Qaeda, the Shia militias, were all funded by Iran. In the 20-year campaign in Afghanistan, Iran funded the Taliban, the Haqqani network, and Al-Qaeda. So we need to be able to take that away. So if the president basically degrades their nuclear capability or decimates it, degrades their ability to advance their technology on ballistic missiles, and decimates their drone industry, then he can say the Middle East is safer. It's not going to be safe as long as the regime is intact. So regime change at the end of this, again, has to be organic, but that is the real goal. That is the goal of the Iranian people, and that is the goal of this military operation. We just won't make the mistakes we made in Iraq. We will not say that the people on this chart, right, they're underlings. We cannot say that you guys are all disqualified from Iran's future like we did with the Ba'ath Party in Iraq. Anybody tied to Saddam, whether it was a doctor, teacher, technocrat, was excluded from polite society and not allowed to be in the economy. We learned from that. You cannot push these people into the insurgency because they're really qualified to be very effective. So we have to get them to defect. We have to get them to pledge that they're going to work with the United States and our Gulf allies and drop the death to Israel, drop the death to America stuff, and be a prosperous economy. Look where you're located. Look at what you are able to export. Look what you're able to control. If you're a peaceful country, there's going to be a lot of benefits to that. But we have to let this be organic. It has to be the Iranian people that change the regime. We can provide the military capabilities to make sure the regime cannot mass and go after protests in certain towns. All of our targets right now are targets of opportunity. We are watching for military movements. We are watching for launchers. We are watching for drone setups. All of these things take about 30 minutes to an hour to get set up, but it takes a couple hours to move. So we're looking at all of that. If we can degrade the regime's ability to crush their population, like they did during the last 2 months, then the people will have a chance to do something. But we need to see something from the people on the ground once these airstrikes start dwindling.
Yes, very good conversation. While we still have on the line, Michael, let's talk big picture. We've seen the Iran hostage crisis. You know, Trump talks about 47 years of oppression and violence from the Iranian regime, the shadow war that just went on for so long. And then you had October 7th, the systematic degrading of first Hamas and then later Hezbollah, and then now the Gulf countries being indiscriminately attacked by Iran, them now turning their opinions and sights against Iran, and then, of course, the U.S. bombardment. So what's the future of Iran with all those things collapsing at the same time? Meanwhile, the Iranian people being victims of the regime and wanting change possibly in their own way. Not to mention all of the media operations, Israel taking out, Hezbollah-linked news organizations, and those are all the things that we know about. We don't know what else the CIA and other Mossad and everything else the United States is doing behind the scenes to put further pressure.
Right. Well, the Hamas playbook is not going to work here with Iran. We've already seen disinformation on attacks, killing innocents, school children, things like that. That was a failed rocket. That was a failed surface-to-air missile that hit that school. So the Hamas playbook is not going to work. So what do I see right now? Iran is desperate, but I think they're more focused. They're focused on energy infrastructure, attacking our Sunni regional allies so that they put pressure on the Trump administration to allow dialogue, to allow some sort of pause in these operations. And when the airstrikes do stop, it doesn't mean we're not still in the sky looking for targets of opportunity. Our intel is able to identify key leaders. So there'll be a lot of things that we continue. My biggest concern is that the president decides to just stop and claim victory, short of actually allowing the time and space for the Iranian people to take back their government. That's my main concern, is that this doesn't continue and meet all of its objectives, that at some point it says this is good enough, let's stop.
Very valuable insight.
And good enough is not going to work.
Understood. Yes, Michael Pregent, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.